All right, good morning, everyone. As you guys take your seats, I'm just going to start with introductions. I'm Lieutenant Alicia PURITT with the Royal Canadian Navy, and today I am joined by Mr. Neil ZERBE, Captain, U.S. Navy Captain Patrick THIEN, and Dr. Gary KESSLER virtually. So today's topic for this morning, we're going to be digging into how innovation interacts and meets maritime challenges. And so we know how reliant all of our navies are currently on complex technologies and what they have to do in the age of accelerated innovation, and while that is still operating, of course, with government procurement speeds. So today we're going to start off with what Captain Navy Patrick THIEN has to say on the age of maritime mines, and then we'll move on, and I will have us go through 15 minutes each, and then we'll move on to question period afterwards. Thank you. I think you have a, okay.
All right, hey, on, check, yes, good. All right, hey, good morning, my name is Captain Pat THIEN. I'm from U.S. Navy, from the Surface and Mine Warfight and Development Center, Mine Countermeasures Technical Divisions. That's a very long explanation of where I'm from, what I do, focus on mine countermeasures and mine warfare. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the Canadian Navy, Navy League as well, and all the sponsors for inviting me up here. I have learned a lot over the last day and expect to learn some more over the next day as well too for maritime security challenges. The question that I was asked to start off with is, why are mines undervalued? And as we get through this, I think that mines and mining have been undervalued by the United States, but not necessarily by our adversaries. And then the other half of mine warfare is mine countermeasures, and it's been undervalued as well too. For some of the challenges, it's difficult, it's long, it's slow, it's tedious. An example that I heard a couple of weeks ago was mine countermeasures is like trying to find a submarine, except for it doesn't move, it doesn't make noise, and it's trying to hide from you because it's buried on the bottom of the ocean. So it's a pretty hard, difficult task to do. But there's some advantages of technology out there that maybe help it out here. If we can go to the next slide, please. I don't like starting anything with mine countermeasures and mine warfare without a quick history lesson. So on the top half of the slide, I've got mine countermeasures. And this is looking at it from a U.S. perspective. I'm in the U.S. Navy, so I look at it from a U.S. perspective. At the end of World War II, mine countermeasures, we had a very robust capability. Mine countermeasure ships were the first ones that led the invasion of Normandy. They swept the channels so the troops could land on Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword Beach. They kept commerce moving as well too. End of the war, quickly, not a peace dividend, but hey, we decommissioned everything that we could get. Go to the Korean War. Excellent amphibious assault on Incheon, tried to redo it on Wonsan Harbor, failed miserably. We lost several ships, as you see the picture there, a destroyer with its bow blown off by a North Korean laid mine. U.S. Navy said, wow, this is not good. We need to reinvigorate our mine countermeasures capability. Got the Ocean and Agile class mine sweepers. Spent some money, and then those ships that were built in the 1950s, by the time the 1980s came around, they were not so effective. The tanker wars that we just talked about, the picture there of the USS Samuel B. Roberts, struck by an Iranian-laid Manta mine, almost sank the ship. And then at that time, there's like, wow, we have to reinvigorate U.S. Navy mine countermeasures again. The Avenger class MCM, which you see there going through San Diego Harbor. Come Desert Shield, Desert Storm, USS Princeton, USS Tripoli, two major capital ships struck by Iraqi-laid mines. Also most likely stopped an amphibious invasion into Kuwait, or at least an amphibious demonstration. What have we done since then? We have tried, but we don't have the most effective mine countermeasures systems that are out there, which is why I've got a question mark there. What are we going to? And hold that thought, because I will get to that further on in the presentation. On the bottom half of the slide, I talk about mining. At the end of World War II, we were good. We were really good. Operation Starvation stopped all traffic around the home islands in Japan. One of the previous presentation, individual talked about that, hey, the blockade of Japan, submarine warfare, but then also mining stopped all traffic in the inland sea of Japan, everything moving from mainland China to Japan as well too. Shift forward to the Vietnam War, Operation Pocket Monkey, and that's really what the name of the operation was. Whoever came up with it. The mining of Haiphong Harbor, shut down Haiphong Harbor for 300 days, helped lead to the negotiations, and then also getting US POWs back home. Very effective use of naval mines. Why has the US and why have the Western allies not used it, developed our technology, our capability since then? The mines that we use now in the US Navy are still the same Mark 80 series dumb bombs modified to be a mine. So we don't have a specifically designed anti-ship mine, anti-submarine mine. Couple reasons. It's hard to control collateral damage. From the Western perspective, from the US perspective, we like to be very precise. We want to put a weapon through a window to kill an individual or have a specific effect. Mines don't really get that. They're not precise. Whatever is out there, if something goes by, if it triggers the targeting data in the mine, it's gonna go boom. It doesn't matter what it is. A merchant ship, we can tie it down and tell the mine kind of what it wants to go to, but not too much. It is not precise. And then after the conflict, we got to clear the dumb things. They're hard to find. So now we have to clear the UXO as well too. And final one, I think this is the most relevant for discussions now. We have had maritime dominance for about 40 years or longer. We can go wherever we have been able to go wherever we wanted to go to do whatever we wanted to do. With the rise of adversaries, especially China, maybe not so much. We don't have necessarily the freedom of maneuver that we used to have. So mining is becoming more relevant to the US. But what about the rest of the world? Next slide, please. Discussion we just saw yesterday, the Black Sea shipping is impacted by conflict. On the left-hand side of the slide, multiple mine strikes and or mines being washed ashore throughout the coast of the Black Sea, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey. Who laid these mines? Not sure, but they're there. It complicates life. Several mine strikes as well too. You see in the inset there, a vessel got struck off of Romania, and then a floating mine off the coast of Turkey. On the right-hand side of the chart, AIS tracks. Prior to conflict, lots of traffic going around all over the place, including into Odessa. When the conflict started, now not all because of mines, but mines are one of the reasons why the maritime traffic going in and out of Odessa and the Ukraine is shut down to nothing. You see it in October now with the establishment of the grain corridor. There is some shipping going into the Ukraine, but still not as much. Ukraine has announced minefields that they laid, potentially slowed down and or stopped a Russian amphibious assault into Odessa. So mines are very capable. And they're very capable, and they're also relevant to our adversaries. If you go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is a maritime security challenges focusing on the Indo-Pacific. If you look on the left-hand side of the slide, AIS shipping traffic, just a snapshot of all the traffic going through the South China Sea, off the coast of Japan, off the coast of China. During yesterday's discussion, 1/3 of global commerce goes through South China Sea. If that is interrupted, just based off of, the discussion that we just had, what is that going to do to economies of the world? We worry about the Straits of Hormuz, if that gets shut down. What about if the Straits of Malacca get shut down? Taiwan Strait as well too. Look at our adversaries in the Indo-Pacific and throughout the world. Russia, their inventory, 250,000 mines. China, 100,000 mines and growing those. The threat of, they don't have to lay every mine. The threat of one mine is gonna shut down straits. If somebody says, hey, we're in an area of conflict, I just laid mines off Straits of Malacca, is anybody gonna go through there? Or even worse, what if they laid mines off the approaches to Long Beach, LA? Is anybody gonna go through there? The backlog that we saw just off of shipping, that can be multiplied exponentially. So there's lots of vulnerabilities in the Pacific from our adversaries. But also, there are opportunities for us as well too. Just because the enemy has a bunch of mines, the adversaries have a bunch of mines, we also can impact their shipping. We can also impact their calculus by mining, putting mines in the water. The challenges that we have, if we can impose executing mine countermeasures, if we can put that challenge onto the adversary, wow, what a great advantage. Keep forcing them to pause, giving an off-ramp, so instead of going to a high-level conflict, hey, maybe we put a couple of mines in the water, and then, wow, we've made them think twice about what they are doing. Do they really want to do this based off the economic costs they're going to get? There are also vulnerabilities that the adversaries have as well, too. If you go to the next slide, please. The second question that I was asked is, how are we introducing new technology into this warfare area? The U.S. Navy is changing our mine countermeasures. We are transitioning from manned systems of traditional wooden hold ship, fiberglass hold ship, going into the minefield, clearing mines via mechanical or other means, to unmanned autonomous systems, helicopters, unmanned surface vessels, unmanned underwater vehicles. You see on the bottom left there, pictures of EOD divers and small boats putting UUVs into the water to go find the mines. On the bottom right, expeditionary support base with helicopters on board. So we are growing expeditionary MCM capability. We are changing the way that we do mine countermeasures as we move forward. Go to the next slide, please. There are also other MIW solutions, mine warfare solutions, throughout the, not only through the U.S. Navy, but throughout our partners and allies as well too. The adaptive force package up in the upper left, putting MH-53 helicopters and an expeditionary company on a expeditionary support base. Long endurance unmanned underwater vehicles, unmanned surface vehicles. The Dutch and the Belgians on the bottom right are getting a joint replacement vessel, and the French and the UK are also developing a mine countermeasures program as well too. Primarily focused on unmanned and autonomous vehicles. In the middle, mining solutions. The U.S. Navy, we have developed a quick strike extended range munition. So we've taken a JDAM kit, a joint direct attack munition, and added that to a quick strike mine. So now we've got a little bit of a standoff capability. And then the bottom is the XL UUV, extra large unmanned underwater vehicle that can transit around underwater the entire time and lay mines and or other things on the seabed. Great innovative solutions for technology moving forward. Next slide, please. As we move forward with mine countermeasures and with mining, there's a lot of challenges we need to look at and innovate to meet the new solutions. How do we make mine countermeasures faster? It is a slow, methodical process. That's just fact of life. It's how it is. Through artificial intelligence and machine learning, how can we make it faster? How do we make our MCM forces more agile? Instead of the top speed of the Avenger class traveling at about 12 knots, how can we make those things faster? How can we move that capability from where it's based to wherever it needs to be? How do we improve our unmanned underwater vehicles, USVs and ROVs, make them longer endurance, go down to deeper depths? How do we operate in challenging environments? Precision navigation and timing. When GPS goes away, or if GPS goes away, how do those UUVs know where they are? How do we know where those mines were? And then the final comment is, how do we improve interoperability? A statement was made yesterday that interoperability is the way to go, and then hopefully get to interchangeability as well too. How do we operate with our partners? How do we contribute and have everybody bring something to the fight? Lots of challenges out there as industry moves forward and we bring these new technologies online. Mine countermeasures is a great way to start that innovation and start that cooperation. Because really, when it comes down to it, finding something on the bottom of the ocean is really a research project. We're just going out there surveying, trying to find something on the bottom of the ocean until we decide if we're going to blow it up or not, or what we're going to do with that mine. If we go to the next slide, please. Finally, I always have to leave off with a good quote. Found this one from President Kennedy, that change is the law of life, and those who will look to the past or present are certain to miss the future. As we move forward with mine countermeasures, we can't do things the same way we've done them before. Same with mining. If we have a large unmanned underwater vehicle that can transit around and drop a bunch of mines, that is a game changer because nobody knows it was there. If we can do clandestine mine countermeasures, underwater vehicles finding, identifying, and clearing mines in a minefield that the adversary laid, now we have a clear path through that minefield. And the adversary thinks that they've blocked off an avenue approach. Now we've got a back door, a way we can reach in and impact the adversary. With that being said, I got the red card, so that means I'm out of time. But thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions farther on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain THIEN. We've got Mr. Neil ZERBE, who's going to be going into the discussion about autonomous systems next.
Good morning. You're doing such a good job of moving the slides. If I touch this thing, I'll probably gomer something up. So let's keep the operator out of the minefield. Good morning. My name is Neil ZERBE, and it's nice to be with you in person here again at Maritime Security Challenges 22. I believe I have the honor of having attended the very first and the last 8 of the MSC, and I find them very valuable for a myriad of reasons. I'm with the Aerospace and Defense Industry Partners Group. We help industry and DoD connect with each other on technologies of mutual, increasing, and emerging interest, whether that's B2B, B2G, or G2P. The photo you're looking at here on the screen is a picture overlooking the Commander Naval Air Force's facilities here. I got 4 carriers lined up for you here along the pier, and then back in the background there is the city of San Diego. Next slide. So what I want to do is just some background to prep the presentation. Quick look at the existing landscape of unmanned systems, then a look downrange at what is shaping up for the future of unmanned maritime systems. Next slide. So the first piece of background, why am I up here? Okay, I look at Captain THIEN, and in a glance, U.S. Navy 06, wearing a designator, exactly what he does. I look on the other side, I know where he's been and what he's done. Instant credibility. And then GIMP comes up to the podium here, and who am I and what do I know about these things? So my bona fides are a former Navy carrier strike fighter guy, so I have significant experience in managing precision weapon systems. As we led into Desert Storm during my XO tour on a carrier, the Air Wing commander said, I need somebody to kind of look at putting Tomahawk land attack missiles on target. So I was involved in the planning of those missions. We launched 188 during Desert Storm, and thus I was introduced to the unmanned systems domain. Be careful how good a job you do. You might get rewarded for it. So I was sent to U.S. Central Command for a joint tour, and there I planned over 6,000 missions, and we launched multiple of those missions in support of UN resolutions for the Joint Task Force in theater. And then I was sent to U.S. Third Fleet as the J5, and under my cognizance was fleet battle experimentation. And during those years, there was heavy focus on the unmanned aerial vehicles and how we were going to bring those into the fleet and what missions they were going to conduct. And then in 2003, I started working UUVs, in 2010, USVs. Next slide. Second piece of the background. So San Diego has all the major players working unmanned systems. We talked about Naval Air Forces. He's headquartered here. He owns all things aviation related for the Navy, including unmanned systems and how they will be brought into the fleet to support naval aviation. You have Commander Naval Surface Forces, single belly button for all the naval surface forces globally. And his focus is making sure the unmanned surface, unmanned systems in total support the surface fleet. Just to the north side of town, we have commanding generals for 1st Marine Expeditionary Force and 3rd Marine Air Wing. Those folks are heavily engaged with both 3rd Fleet and other agencies on developing unmanned systems to support the Marine and Expeditionary domain. My brother Patrick THIEN just got done taking us through Schmidt. He lives right up there, and they focus on that surface and mine warfare domain. And then UWDC, Undersea Warfare Development Center, has their planning element there, and they look at things very specifically undersea, but they use both UUVs and USVs. Finally, 3rd Fleet down here is the numbered fleet warfighter. His job is to take this kludge of unmanned systems and figure out how to operate them in the fleet. So this AOR is the preponderance of where unmanned systems find their way into end users and to acquisition. Next slide. I am not going to go through this column by column. Matter of fact, this is a quick look overview. I want you to be aware of what's out there as far as air, surface, and subsurface unmanned systems, okay? It's all open source information. We'll talk about a couple specifically downrange. Next slide. This will look into the lower, the smaller of those UAVs, USVs, UUVs, and there's some ground, unmanned ground vehicles over there to the right. Once again, I'm not going to drill down on those, but growing our awareness of the broad spectrum of unmanned systems that we have to work from. Next slide. This is from the Program Executive Office of Unmanned Systems. And so this is his guide for where they are going with USVs, okay? It's their vision of what they're going to look at downrange, open source, and for industry, a guide on where they plan to go, what they plan to do, and help us industry folks connect with the right folks to bring technology to support that. Next slide. Same thing with the UUVs. This is PEO USC's slide on UUV systems vision and where they plan to go and what they want to do. Roadmap for those of us trying to bring this into the end user domain. Next slide. This is the UGV quick look. A similar type slide, it's dated a little bit, but what I wanted to share on here is growing the awareness of how when an unmanned system first comes online and where they want to go with it. This gives you an idea of how they look at that over a 5 or 6 year period and shape the technology to support those needs. Next slide. A vignette, if you will. I'm pulling out a Maritime USV missions quick look, and the preponderance of my experience with unmanned systems the last few years has been in the USV domain. It is a mushrooming industry. This particular company developed a COTS USV in the last decade to support commercial missions, survey of dams, intercoastal waterways, and so on. From 2012 to present, they have participated in dozens of DoD-sponsored experiments and exercises to assess missions USVs can support in the fleet, building a trusted wingman. So this is a decent list. I lifted it right off their website. If you want to drill down more, you can. I'm not going to go through them line item. We can talk about Q&A if you want to know more. But I will tell you that one area that is really starting to get translated to the industry folks is in the Indo-PACOM AOR, the ability to do unmanned systems C6ISR OTH. So first of all, C6ISR, command, control, communications, computers, combat systems, cyber, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So that's why we use that acronym. OTH is over the horizon, okay? This particular company, Martac, with their USVs, demonstrated the ability to command and control a USV in the Southern Pacific from their headquarters in Melbourne, Florida. I will do one vignette of one of the missions up here because I was reminded of it when we were talking about the piracy situation. So one of the things that was conducted during RIMPAC 2016 and Trident Warrior is the experiment that it fell under. So one of the 6-foot USVs was on board one of the oilers. As he got to the first buoy entering Pearl Harbor, they launched the USV. The USV goes out ahead on the path that the oiler is going to take to her berth, kind of looks around, reports back everything they see above and below the surface, gets right up to the berth area, kind of circles that around. Meanwhile, the oiler's coming in, takes up her place there. They load her. That USV stays running around that oiler the entire time she's there being loaded. When she leaves, the USV heads back out till you get to the #1 buoy, loads them up, and they're on their way. So one of the vignettes of the missions there. Next slide. All I want to show here is what it takes for industry folks who want to collaborate with DoD on projects. So this is a decade's worth of work that these folks have done globally to help shape the missions of USVs. So this was a win for DoD, a win for the company, a win for fleet end users and taxpayers who don't have to spend $1 billion to buy platforms to accomplish what's affordable and in some cases expendable with USVs, but must be present to win. Next slide. Go ahead and let it roll. So this is video from a USV in the Baltic about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is one of the USVs that drove in to the port, surveilled the ships, took out some targets. You'll see a helicopter come to the picture here pretty quick. He wants to try and take this USV out before he can get inside and start taking out the Russian platforms there. I have a interview with one of the Intel guys, or the Pentagon spokesman for this particular evolution. If you want to talk about that, you can either sidebar with me, or if it comes up during Q&A, I'll read you some of the salient points of the lessons learned for naval warfare out of that evolution. I suspect many of you were in RIMPAC 22. DoD experimented heavily with unmanned systems with coalition and allied partners. Here, the ONR Sea Hunter medium-sized USV is departing Pearl Harbor for the op area. Next slide. Last week, in an address to industry, the commander of U.S. Third Fleet was asked how he intends to expedite getting unmanned systems into the fleet. His response was that he plans to increase experimentation and exercises using unmanned systems to develop the CONOPS to expedite getting these unmanned systems into end users' hand. We don't know what we don't know, and the technology is developing faster than a legacy acquisition system can process. To his point, the above picture is a clip out of a Fifth Fleet AOR newspaper. That's a U.S. Coast Guard cutter with 2 of the MARTAC 12-foot Mantis USVs as wingmen patrolling the Arabian Gulf. Last month, L3 Harris, working a major open ocean C6 ISR program, there'll be a quiz on that afterwards, the C6 ISR, partnered with a small USV manufacturer, local San Diego area small business. Captain THIEN and I saw CSAT on the demo out at a event we were at, and they're going to use that USV with her satellite array on her top deck. What is she, about 9 feet long? And but she's going to float out there in places where there's connectivity issue. So this stuff is happening fast. 99% of the success is showing up. Contractor owned, contractor operated. Okay, with the budget morass ongoing, continuing resolutions, traditional acquisition process is wounded. Navy has some successful COCO models. Scan Eagle, that's a UAV that launches and recovers from the back of surface ships. Aerospace was just given an award within the last month as a maritime UAV COCO capability. So DoD doesn't have to acquire the technology. They don't have to own it, maintain it, to some degree train to it. They just get the data that's provided by it. The big dog in the COCO domain is U.S. Southern Command. Southern Command and 4th Fleet do not have the size of fleets that Pacific and Atlantic have. So what they do is they go to COCO's industry and they tell them, I want this ISR data, okay? Don't tell them how to suck eggs, I need the data. And that's how they do business. Industry manages the equipment that gathers that. As I wind down here, these are 2 guiding documents for DoD unmanned systems. Roadmaps to industry that talk about how DoD and very specifically Department of the Navy plans to do business working downrange. One of the best current articles on DoD government industry collaboration to integrate unmanned systems into the fleet was published in the Naval Engineers Journal this year in March. This group of government and industry folks developed the interoperability roadmap for current and future integration of unmanned systems into the fleet. For those of us in industry, this is a Rommel, you magnificent bastard, I read your book moment. For those less than 40, that comes from the movie Patton. Finally, as a closing, I'm not going to read these, but I'm going to let you take a look at them. I'll make a couple comments on them. These are our Chief of Naval Operations. These are his perspectives on where we're going with unmanned systems in support of the fleet. He's not planning to see a 600-ship Navy anytime soon. So finding unmanned maritime systems to fill those gaps is critical. More affordable, attritable and risky environments, loyal wingmen, manpower reduction, as well as keeping sailors and Marines out of minefields. Long-range, sustainable solutions. Next slide. This is me. I look forward to either sidebarring with you and certainly looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. ZERBE. Next, we have our virtual participant, Dr. Gary KESSLER. So if we can just connect over. There we go.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to share some slides here. And I looked up the quote because I saw the movie when I was a young person. Can you all see my slides okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for hosting me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, well, let me talk a little bit about some cybersecurity. So I actually am a retired professor of cybersecurity, retired a couple years ago. I now have more jobs than I've ever had in my life, or certainly more titles. I'm here representing a company called Fathom 5. There was mention earlier about things we did during the COVID-19 shutdown. During the COVID-19 shutdown, I wrote a book because I really wasn't doing much of anything else. So maritime cybersecurity is something I've been engaged in now for about 5 years. Cybersecurity itself is something I've been engaged in for about 5 decades. And so let me just move on here. So there's a couple things that I think I'm going to start by telling you all that all of you know already. But what I'm going to try to do is provide for you a different perspective on things, because it has been my role to think about any system that has information in it as an attack vector. And so the maritime transportation system, of course, is a system of systems. We sometimes, particularly I think with some of the audience here, tend to think of our own environment. I teach a maritime cybersecurity course at the Coast Guard Academy. I did a sabbatical there 3 years ago, and I subsequently continue to teach my seminar there. I'm teaching it this semester. And one of the things I find when I talk to the Coast Guard cadets is they know about ships and they know about ports, but they don't think about the rest of the MTS in many cases, and particularly when it comes to commercial. So I'm gonna talk a little bit more about some of this, but you know, when I think about a port, you've all heard the quote: "If you've seen one port, you've seen one port." But ports do have a fair amount of commonality in the kind of things that are going on there, dealing with the logistics and the operation, marine construction, sometimes destruction and decommissioning of vessels. And so while these type of things happen differently at every port, I have an opportunity to figure out what is my way in to attack that information. I look at intermodal transfers. Well, of course, the port is what connects the sea to the land. So I have to move stuff from a ship to a plane to an inland barge to a truck to a railway. And one of the things that we learn in cyber is that if you have the best cyber defense in the world, well, then I don't attack you. I attack somebody with whom you are doing business and they have legitimate access into your networks. I attack them and use their legitimate access to get into you, which is why intermodal transfers become so important. Ships, of course, and I'm going to show another picture of this, but ships, of course, are their own floating city. I mean, they desalinize their own water in many cases. But certainly they have communication systems all over the place. And certainly in the commercial world, I've been on several ships that have claimed, oh yes, we've kept our operational network separate from our information technology network. Oh, except for that one router. Well, you know, you don't have two separate networks if they come together at a router somewhere. Shipping lines, and we've already heard a little bit about Maersk this morning. Shipping lines are just like any other company anywhere else in the world. All what makes them unique and different is, of course, they own and operate vessels, but they have the same networks and the same information security concerns that every other company has. They make reservations, they have scheduling, they have logistics, they have to deal with people and reservations and finance and all that kind of stuff. So the point is, they provide me with a ton of attack vectors. A little bit harder to talk about the attack vectors on inland waters, but you can imagine what could happen if I could impact things like aids to navigation on inland waterways. Now, it turns out my area of research happens to be with the automatic identification system, and particularly spoofing of AIS. So I have built all sorts of spoofing models where I have made virtual ATONs where no other ATONs exist. And then, of course, we have to deal with people. Now, people in the maritime transportation system think everybody. We're talking about your employees at your port or on your ship. You're talking about your passengers. I mean, imagine for a second being the cybersecurity manager of a transportation vessel, you know, Odyssey of the Seas. You've got 3,500 of the enemy coming on your boat every day. We have our vendors, we have trading partners. Again, we have, you know, all those same kind of issues. So like I said, I want you to think of all of this as an attack vector. Now, before I go too far afield on this, this is a absolutely non-complete list of the different types of cybersecurity attacks that we may have in a variety of places. We hear about ransomware all the time because ransomware is hot, it's in the news, it's sexy, there's a lot of money involved. We've been seeing ransomware impacting the maritime industry one way or another since 2017, but it is certainly not the only type of attack that we can have. Now, since I got you this far, I'm going to go just a little bit more down the rabbit hole and tell you why I don't like the word cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, in my view, and in the discussions that I have with a lot of people, makes people focus too much on computers and communications. And I believe that the focus has to be on information in all forms, no matter how you have it. A computer, of course, is a container for information, and communications are your conduits of moving information. So I get it. You have to protect your computers and you have to protect your communications. But the bottom line, fundamentally, what we're trying to protect is information. And I don't think that cybersecurity makes us think enough about that. So what I have up here is a slide on something called the CIA triad, which is a very common model that we use in cyber to talk about the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. There's also a guy named Don Parker a couple decades ago added 3 more characteristics: the utility, authenticity, and the possession of information, hence the Parkerian hexad. But the point is, if I take any of these attacks, I can categorize them based upon which aspects of information they impacted. So, like I said, that's a little bit of a rat hole. I'm not going to continue too far down that. I'm just going to move on. There are some aspects of cyber that are unique in the maritime transportation sector. I've heard a lot of people who are not maritime folk say something like, if the MTS, if they would just do basic cybersecurity 101 correctly, they'd be fine. To a certain degree that they're right. However, they miss the fact that, here in the upper left, I've got a little bit of an eye chart that is a picture of many, if not, I don't think it's all, but it's certainly most of the different types of communication networks that you have on board a large ship. We have the automatic identification system. Nobody else has that. And there is large dependence on AIS, in some cases for appropriate things, in some cases, in my view, inappropriate things. I mean, using AIS for sanction monitoring and enforcement is not what AIS was invented for. You have a port. A port is also, to a certain degree, its own city with a fence around it. And we don't see that normally in the wild. But the point is that they are providing for us all sorts of unique software systems, hardware systems, and the interconnection of all of those. So I told you that really so I could mostly get here. There are a number of maritime cybersecurity challenges that we have. And my first and favorite is talking about vulnerability of navigation systems. We all know that global nav satellite systems, particularly GPS, are prone to jamming and prone to spoofing. And we don't have really good defenses against that. And we don't have really good augmentation for GPS. And we certainly don't have it for AIS. AIS has a number of security vulnerabilities, such as lack of timestamp, lack of authenticity, lack of integrity checking, that have been well known for over a decade. There is no work in any standards body, of which I'm aware, where anybody's really seriously trying to address AIS. One of the problems that we have, not just in maritime, but it is throughout all of information technology, but I want to concentrate on maritime right now, is lack of resiliency. And by lack of resiliency, what I mean is we build systems where we believe we understand how they're going to fail because we believe that nature is our enemy. So we understand stochastically and statistically mean time to failure, mean time to repair, and all that kind of stuff. What we do not think so much about is what happens when the enemy is an intelligent human actor. And I'll give an example. Earlier, we heard about Maersk and how Maersk was able to recover because there was a power failure in Nigeria. So thank goodness for power failures in Nigeria. The success, or rather, of Maersk to recover was this. Maersk had backup of all of their data. That was not the issue. Microsoft Enterprise Systems use something called Active Directory. Active Directory is what allows computers to find other computers. And there's a whole network of Active Directory servers. Maersk had dozens of them. So you tend not to back up the Active Directory because if one system fails, you take it offline, you put another server online, it exchanges information with all the other Active Directory servers, and everybody, continues right along. What Active Directory is not built for is losing all the Active Directory servers at once. The server in Nigeria that was saved because it was offline was one Active Directory server that was able to then repopulate all the other Active Directory servers. So now let's think about GPS. I have something like 28 or 32 GPS satellites. I'm not using all of them. I don't need all of them at any given moment. If one of them views itself as being unhealthy, effectively it takes itself offline. And if a new satellite comes now online, it exchanges information and that kind of stuff. GPS is not designed for resiliency against Vladimir Putin deciding, I'm going to shoot all 32 satellites down at once. Autonomy in Industry 4.0. I'm not going to be able to say as many words about this as I would like, but we've already heard a number of reasons about why autonomy is a big deal in maritime. And one of the issues with autonomy is now think about changes we're going to need to make to the collision regulations. I mean, I'm not concerned about an autonomous unmanned vessel in blue water. I'm concerned about it in brown water. Because if I can have a watch stander, which I need to have, according to the call regs, if I can have a watch stander by virtue of the fact of having a lot of cameras that are going back to a land-based system somewhere, it is folly to believe that a bad guy can't intercept and or inject into that communication. Oblique attacks. I actually started to allude to this before, but I will allude to it now. If I want to take out the US Navy in San Diego, I'm not going to attack the US Navy in San Diego. I'm not stupid. I'm going after commercial vessels in San Diego because I have observed, at least in a couple places in San Diego, the military vessels are in the back and the commercial vessels are in the front. If I can take out a commercial vessel, I can shut the port. This is a picture here, another eye chart. This happens to be the port of, I think that's the port of Los Angeles. And I will observe that half of the berthing is on the southern part of that little island and half is on the north. And if I could interject something that would take out that little roadway there on the right, that is where the trucks and the railroad cars go, I could effectively take out half the port with a little cyber attack. Workforce development. I'm going to talk a little bit more about workforce development in a second. We do not have sufficient number of people in the cybersecurity billets around the nation that we need to, certainly not enough around the world. And in maritime particularly, we really do have to grow our own because we don't have enough people that understand maritime and understand information security, nor do we have adequate information sharing resources so that people can stay abreast of the things they need to know about. So this is a picture of my wife in Hawaii herding fish. So if we think herding cats is hard, try doing it in 3 dimensions. So I want to observe that we've got plenty of guidelines. We have plenty of policies. We need people with these characteristics. We don't need to have everybody in cybersecurity knowing how to use a soldering iron and writing code. We need to have people that are creative. They have imagination. They're curious. They need to know something about tech, of course. They need to know how to solve problems, and they need to think like a bad guy. They need to be able to look at a system and figure out, how would I break it? I've got a great quote here by Bruce Schneier, who's very well known in the cryptography and cybersecurity fields. Amateurs hack systems, professionals hack people. And this is largely a people problem. It is not a technology problem. And I'm going to end with a final story because I can't, I will give this quote that anyone who thinks that technology can solve their problem does not understand technology or their problem, which just, feeds my, my belief that this is not just a technology problem. But I'm going to leave with a story. And ironically, it also has to do with mines. When we are planning a cyber defense, we cannot confuse a threat from a vulnerability. I get offers all the time to go to talks where people are going to talk about the threat landscape in maritime cyber, to which I always must say, well, this is interesting, but who cares? What I do care about are the vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are internal. I'm the one who can learn how to understand my vulnerability and figure out how they can be exploited and do something about it. I have no control over the threats and who, because they're external to me. My point being, if I'm going to prepare a cyber defense. I have to prepare my cyber defense around the vulnerabilities, which I can learn about and I can fix. Can't build it around the threats. So all of you mariners in the room will know what this lighting configuration means. So this is not only a minesweeper engaged in minesweeping activities, but it's coming straight at me, which indicates that I am in the minefield. I used to use this as a little bit of, dark humor, but so here's my story. At the beginning of World War II, in the Battle of the Atlantic, the Germans were dropping magnetic mines all around the UK. So we understand the threat of the Germans. The vulnerability is mines against a ship. They're bad. It turns out here, though, that the exploit was when a ship went near the mine, it changed the magnetic flux, and that caused the mine to release and be attracted to the steel-hulled ship, which was bad. When the Brits figured out the arming mechanism, they were able to degauss their ships. The ships now no longer trip the mines. My point being, the vulnerability still existed. The threat still existed. What happened was the exploit was mitigated. So with that, I think I've gone a minute or so over my time. So I'm going to exit out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gary Kessler. We're going to go to questions. And again, just as we said before, keep it to a question, not a comment. And I can go first, since again, taking that, as I said, moderator prerogative. My question actually has to do with, we have current, we have former military, and we have outside civilian perspective, and with the need to be able to agilely pivot and be able to recognize the importance of autonomous and cyber, as well as knowing innovations are coming. How are we supposed to integrate that into the maritime domain? And I will hand it over.
Thanks. So I'll start with it depends. So there will be a threat assessment depending upon whether it's cyber, whether it's unmanned, and I include mines in the unmanned domain. So there will be a threat assessment, and what's happening now is very exciting. The way that we used to prosecute, whether it's cyber, whether it's mines or whether it's something other with unmanned systems, we've got new and faster ways to do it. The term didn't come up in our discussion today, but it's very much connected to it, and that's the AI piece of it. And so we now have that AI monitoring all three of those areas that we were discussing here, and that allows a much faster response. Sometimes there's somebody in a command center that's directing that response. In many cases, the unmanned systems we have out there have been programmed to auto-respond. Over to you, Pam.
I think this is on, right. I'd agree with your first statement that it depends, which is kind of a cop-out, but then also it does depend on what the system is that we're talking about integrating. I think as we bring in new technology, and you brought up AI, machine learning, I think the hardest problem we're going to confront in the future is trusting AI and machines to do what they think we're doing. Those of us who are old enough remember Skynet and other things of the machines are taking over. That's not going to happen. But for machines, unmanned systems, to earn the trust that they'll continually do what we expect them to do, so then commanders can have the trust that, hey, this system is going to go out and execute the mission as tasked, as fragged, and do what it is supposed to do. That's going to take some integration, take some time. Myself personally, 2 years ago, I was a significant doubter on some of the AI, some of the automatic target recognition for mine countermeasures. I saw a demonstration, was about a month or so ago, of 2 unmanned underwater vehicles doing a search for mine countermeasures, for mines, vehicles talking back and forth to each other, speeding up the timelines, where one continued on their search pattern. It found something interesting, communicated that to another vehicle, and then that vehicle found and identified and said, yep, this is a mine, it needs to be further looked at and neutralized. Just by that one step, we can take our mine countermeasures timelines and cut it in almost half. So it goes to the trust and the repeatability of AI and other things and systems as we bring them online.
I'm not going to go with the it depends. I may have a slightly more nuanced view, and I'm looking more globally than just military systems. First of all, I have read a lot of the research on autonomous vessels and various levels, all the way up from class 1 to class 5 autonomy. I have read almost nothing about how we're going to secure those systems. I'm sure work is being done, but I have not seen any of the research. I have not seen papers talking about security by design. My experience over the years has been anytime you take a system and add security to it, you do not do it well, and you do not do it in a cost-efficient way. Security has to be built into the very design of these systems. When it comes to AI, I observe Stephen Wright, the comedian, has a joke where he talks about, he says, for my birthday, I was given a humidifier and a dehumidifier. I put them in the same room and decided to let them fight it out. That is the problem with AI as a defense, because AI is also being used for an attack. And if you build any system that has an automated response that I, as an attacker, can ascertain what your response is going to be, I own you. I may as well be inside your systems managing what you're going to do, because I can create the set of stimuli that will cause the response that I want. And that is the concern that I have with the autonomous. Now, I believe that the military is probably doing this better than the commercial world. But I again think that all of these issues come together because the commercial world is sharing the waterway with everybody else.
Hello, David Merrick, RCN. For Captain THIEN, one of the issues with mines I've seen in the past is that they are very cheap, very simple systems. How do you address the cost issue where a country can drop a few mines off the back of a tugboat for, a few $1,000s, and we have to come in with a multi-million or billion-dollar system to clear them?
You brought out the exact problem with mine warfare and mine countermeasures. That if you look to from my presentation, the quote from Admiral Forrest Sherman, the CNO, in the 1950s, the full details of the quote was essentially the world's most powerful navy couldn't do what we wanted to do because we were stopped by technology from World War I, laid by people who used boats that were around at the time of Jesus Christ. So yes, that is the biggest problem with mine countermeasures. It is easy and cheap to put something in the water. It doesn't even need to be a mine. It could be something that looks like a mine. It could be a 55-gallon drum. It could be a VW bug. It could be whatever it is. And the challenge and the problem that we have is that as we develop our systems, the newer systems, when we go into unmanned, they are actually going to be cheaper than some of the systems that are out there. Buying 5 unmanned underwater vehicles is much cheaper than buying 5 manned mine hunting ships. So that's one of the reasons why we are shifting towards unmanned and autonomous vehicles. There's always going to be an advantage to the adversary if we're looking at straight cost of mining vice mine countermeasures. It's a lot easier to put the threat out there and then have somebody else try to figure out, hey, congratulations, you've got this threat. You're going to have to spend X number of resources to do it. U.S. Navy, we have made choices in a resource-constrained environment. I would love to have lots of millions of dollars for the price of several F-35s. I could provide a really, really good mine countermeasures capability. We've made a decision that this is not what we're going to do. We're going to assume some risk in some areas and go the other. The key point, and I'll wrap up with this, is that if we develop a credible mining capability as well too, now we can impose that cost in time and money onto our adversaries as well too. Why should we cede the battle space, cede that option to the enemy, to our adversaries, that yes, they can put this type of weapon in the water, and then now we have to spend a bunch of money, and we have to, they've imposed doubt and or time into our plans. If we have that ability for a minimal amount of cost, which is where we're going with some of the mines that capabilities I talked about, that hey, we can put this cost on our adversaries as well too. Maybe they're not going to spend as much money developing hypersonics, developing other things, and maybe they're going to have second and third thoughts about, are their plans effective or not?
I have two questions. The first one about the mine near the Bosphorus. The mine near the Bosphorus apparently has not affected the traffic, or maybe I'm wrong, but it did not generate the fear that people could have expected of a mine in this choke point. And my second question is related to the video we've seen in the second presentation. I would like to have more details. It's very interesting from the control, the command and control point of view, because I wonder how those drones were directed and from what distance they operated, if they were dropped by a mothership or if they were able to complete the journey from Ukrainian territory.
All right, thank you. I'll take the first question. True that the presence of floating mines did not really affect commerce that much in the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, which is a good thing. The potential for that is still there. I think for some of the responses from countries in the Black Sea, they were out there, they were noticed, but then also it was not to the level of there's a mine out here and everybody go crazy. It was definitely kept down at a lower level for a specific reason to in the best way I could say it is to help everyone maintain calm. And then also, luckily, there was not an actual strike of a ship either approaching or exiting the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. The mines that were there were washed up on shore. So it's a little bit easier to alleviate the fears of the shipping community if these things are washed up on shore by, so there's lots of random things floating around in the Black Sea. And I'll turn it over to Neil for the other question.
Thanks. So I wasn't in the bowels of the U.S. Pacific Fleet Intelligence Center. What I've got is a source who remains unnamed, but did put this out in the broader private sector, so you can find it online. What I found were the things. Some of these will answer your question. Some of them will put it in context, and some we don't know what we don't know at this point in time. But what you saw in this video is on the 29th of October, Sevastopol in the occupied Crimea, home to the Russian Sea's Black Fleet, was rocked by these mysterious explosions. So details are scarce, but with the coming dawn, remarkable footage was released of sleek black maritime drones maneuvering around the bay on the way to their targets. Russian warships were the targets. 7 maritime and 9 aerial drones were reported to have been used in the coordinated attack, which damaged the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Admiral Makarov, as well as other vessels. The nearest Ukrainian-controlled coastline, almost 300 kilometers from Sevastopol, the ability of these drone boats to reach their targets in the heart of Russian naval power in the Black Sea shocked observers. The low cost, maneuverability, and effectiveness of the drones have led to the attack on Sevastopol being described as a revolutionary moment in the development of modern naval warfare. I'll give you just a couple of other pieces. The source says, I can't see, retired Navy 06 is about all I know from the source. I can't see an equivalent in the history of naval warcraft to application of drones, both reconnaissance and attack, maritime and aerial, together like this. It's a new way of waging war on the sea. Nobody has done anything like this before. There's some other pieces that go on to talk about why didn't the radar pick them up. And so you all saw that picture of the two Mantis USVs that were cruising with the Coast Guard in the Arabian Gulf. When there is any kind of sea state like 1.5 or more, those things disappear between the wave tops. And so it's very difficult to detect those things. Unlike torpedoes or other weapons that we launch and leave, these guys remain connected either from what they've learned autonomously or by operators to go to the target if something changes. So they're not a torpedo that's found the target and is going to the center of the ship. They may be being directed by a command center somewhere to go to another target. So this changes things up quite a bit. I know that's not the total answer to your question. It's what I know. I think details will filter in over time about how this happened, but it is a change in the way we do business. By the way, he also says no Ukrainian soldier, sailor, Marine was harmed in the attack.
Angus Topchick, Canadian Navy. I'm curious about the Nord Stream pipeline incident, and what I've heard us talk about is seabed warfare, and just, is this an evolution that we were expecting or something we'd been anticipating and has finally manifested?
Hard question, Admiral, and give me a pause for a second to subsea and seabed warfare is, I think, the next evolution of mining and mine warfare. As we develop more autonomous systems, we do, and our adversaries do as well too. The definition of what a mine is changing, and even from right now, some of the adversary mine capability that is out there, there are mines that move. They're laid in one spot, they stay there for a while, and then they get up and they go to another spot. The definition of what a mine is and what it is used for also changes. So now, if you were looking at subsea and seabed warfare, not only are we having to worry about mines that are in the water column that can affect ships, we also need to worry about mines and or IEDs, whatever we want to call them, that are affecting things that are on the bottom of the ocean, as shown by Nord Stream pipeline. There's lots of vulnerabilities as well too. A slide that was shown yesterday showed all the underwater cables that are going everywhere. A significant vulnerability as well too. This goes back to, for mine countermeasures, what we do with UUVs and what actually industry does right now. They use UUVs all the time to look at undersea pipelines just for maintenance, make sure pipelines are in the right spot, make sure they're where they need to be. That's a capability, that's a tool that we can use as well too for developing mine countermeasures. The hardest question is for looking at things that are above the water. It's easy to get a persistent stare and detect change right away. Radar works pretty well, radar from satellite airplanes. If we want to look at something all the time, it's very easy to get a persistent stare on there. The hard problem is under the water. It's very hard to get a persistent stare and get the continual relook of something. And that's where one of the challenges with UUVs having that extended endurance UUV that can go back and look at something again and again, be it a day apart, a week apart, or whatever, and have that change detect and figure out there is something new there that wasn't there yesterday. Who put it there? Well, actually, I have to say, what is it? Why is it there? And then who put it there as well, too. So that's a definite challenge as we move forward, that the definition of a mine is potentially changing. That's something we're looking at as well, too.
I'll add to that. So Captain THIEN's sister command in San Diego is the Undersea Warfare Development Center. This is something that they look at pretty closely, and as you might imagine, not too much open source data to discuss there. I will tell you this. They came to one of our clients who does security and monitoring of oil fields that are submerged. And so they've got UUVs that go out and monitor these lines, both for maintenance purposes, security purposes, and the like. Matter of fact, they've got a holster, a quiver of these things that are parked on the seabed floor, and they come in and they plug themselves in, they regenerate themselves, the next one leaves, goes out and does a tour of all the infrastructure that's out there. So the technology, the unmanned systems technology that's out there is available for us to leverage. And so we are having those discussions with Undersea Warfare Development Center on how to leverage that to support other infrastructure needs. And some of those are pretty deep, you know, junction boxes at the bottom of the Pacific and so on.
Good morning, Kevin Carley with the Naval Association of Canada. In terms of mines, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, of the impact and the humanitarian costs of landmines and the non-combatants that have been affected by that. Is there any similar work being done or concerns or issues related to non-combatants in terms of being victims of maritime or naval mines? I'm thinking cruise ships, fishers, etc.
I'm giving a pause to put my thoughts into order before I answer that question.
Think about it just a second. That's a good point on the HADR. While Patrick pulls those thoughts together, it's something that we didn't discuss in this forum, but the use of unmanned systems in the HADR is huge. Just think about back to the nuke plant Fukushima from the tsunami in Japan. And so there were multiple unmanned systems, both aerial, ground, and surface, that went in to take readings, take a look at what's broken and the like. So those type of, you know, USV or humanitarian assistance, disaster relief are out there. One of the other things that's happening is after some of the recent hurricanes have gone through, they send those USVs in there to look around and find out what's damaged, what's in the bottom of the harbor, how soon can we get support ships and the like in there. So HADR has a lot of potential opportunity support from unmanned systems.
All right, thanks for giving me the time to get one or two of my thoughts in order there. So it's a very good question with the implication of sea mines and how they are used. We can, when, not to get too technical, but when a mine is put in the water, we can shape it to, maybe shape is the wrong word, but we can program it the right way so it's looking for specific types of vessels, ships, or whatever, lots of different ways, ship counts, acoustic signatures, magnetic signatures, etc. The problem, and I think one of the issues why the U.S. Has not specifically used mines a lot, and I brought this out in my presentation, is that they're not precise. We like to have a very precise weapon system that we know it's going to go to this point, going to go do this one specific effect. Naval mines are not quite as precise as, say, a laser-guided bomb or a Hellfire or something like that. They are still very effective, and as technology is improving, we can get them to be pretty precise for what they need to do. The other part of your question, the implications for civilian and maritime traffic. According to UNCLOS, Law of the Sea, a bunch of other different documents out there, I'm not a JAG, so I'm going to mess up exactly what they are. But one of the requirements is when you put mines into the water, you have to make a notification. You have to tell everybody, hey, we have put mines into the water. This area is dangerous. Stay away. This is what the Ukrainians did off of Odessa and off of their shorelines. On the slide that I put up, there's a little red hashed area. That's where they declared their minefields. You are supposed to declare where you put your mine. You're supposed to know how many you put in the water. So when conflict is done, you, whoever laid it, or somebody can go in and pick them back up and clear them. The problem with mines is they're really hard to find. Once they're in the water, the environment changes, the bottom changes. Sometimes if you put 10 in the water, you're not sure if you're going to get 10 back or not. They're supposed to have self-scuttling features where they become, okay, they're not a threat and they're not to the level of a landmine. Say some of the HADR, don't think back to, maybe HADR is the wrong phrase, but the humanitarian demining going on still in areas of Afghanistan, think so areas of Southeast Asia as well too, where there's still humanitarian demining operations going on. That's a challenge that goes with naval mines. I think that's and I'll defer to the Admiral on this one, that's a decision that the commanders make at a higher level with the risk that they're going to take to employ a certain weapon system or not. What's the risk and what's the reward from using that weapon system? Are you going to get the effect that you're trying to impose upon your adversaries?
This question's Captain Jill Merrick. This is a question for Dr. KESSLER, and I'm struck by your comments of understanding the vulnerabilities and the threats. And from a warfighter's perspective, in the maritime environment, historically he was concerned with the surface and subsurface, but you're introducing this other element that's largely in space. We can't see it. So what advice would you have for warfighters about the future decision-making space that they're operating in?
Well, thank you for the question. You bring up an excellent point. I mean, this is an entirely different domain. And if you're thinking about it in terms of warfare, it is certainly a different domain of warfare. And in fact, none of the other domains of warfare today can probably exist without the cyber domain. So I'm not exactly sure from there, really where to go with your question. The individual warfighter probably is not going to be able to do much of anything different than rely on their systems. In terms of maritime, I have actually been advocating wherever I go, that vessels need to have an information security officer, not merely an IT officer or an ET. My point being that cybersecurity, information security, cyber defense, whatever we want to call it, is a different profession and a different mindset from information technology. And the people that are building the networks have a particular skill set. There's great overlap between information technology and information security, but they're different things. And so we need to make sure that there is an information security officer. I believe that the information security officer should be reporting to the master, or at least first mate or captain or XO of a ship. And it has to be taken very, very seriously by everybody from the top down. We need to have significant cyber awareness. We need to have a cyber safety culture. And I will leave you with the following. I observe that I'm going to guess that nobody in this room has yet taken their 1 hour of mandatory annual training in the use of Microsoft Word. And the reason probably is that you use Word every day. And yet we require that you take 1 or 2 hours of mandatory cybersecurity training every 6 months or every year, because we're not thinking in terms of cyber safety every single day. And that's what needs to change.
I wanted
Paul
to ask you a
Saguna
question,
with the
sir.
Naval Association of Canada. Recently, with the Ukrainian crisis, Russian propagandists have been pretty blatant in publicly outlining the potential of the Russian autonomous torpedo that has been apparently developed. This really, I think, crosses over all three of your areas. Just for to get your thoughts on that, because now we're crossing into beyond the tactical and into the use of strategic nuclear weapons being merged with these technologies. And just was wondering what your thoughts were on that development.
I missed the first part of the question, so I'll let you get started.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, with the potential emergence of a weapon like that, with strategic implications, that's from my very lowly perspective as an 06 dealing just with mine warfare, that it is not necessarily a game changer. I don't want to use that phrase. I don't want to use that term. It is a potential. I don't even know the right word I can think here. It's a potential for something to be bad, but without having seen it and having a demonstrated capability, it's maybe not quite as much there. The crossover from that weapon, if it does what it says it's supposed to be able to do, then okay, now there's just another long-range weapon that's a strategic weapon, I would think, that needs to be looked at and taken care of, and figure out some potential opportunity for it. The viability of that, that is far outside of my swim lane where I could be able to even bring up something useful for a discussion on that. I apologize on that.
So this technology is global. I mean, there are commercial vendors selling this unmanned systems, manufacturing it, selling it globally. So it's almost as easy as going down to Home Depot and buying your kit and prepping it for what you want to do. So that has certainly been thought about on the DoD side of things, and there is an effort going on at NAVWAR, led by the Admiral there, called Project Overmatch, and that's about all I can say about it, because he won't tell me any more about it. They're not ready for industry to engage there, but you can imagine what that is. To your point, there is a lot of effort to do anti-UAV, anti-USV, anything that can bounce those things off so that they cannot continue to their intended location. And that's probably a segue for me to our other panelist to let him talk about that a little bit, sir.
Well, this is certainly not my area of expertise. But I'll give you some knee-jerk reactions based upon what I know, and I've only read a couple of articles about this. So first of all, they're going to have to navigate to get where it is they're going to be going. They're looking at some global nav system and it could very well be multi-constellations. So if it's Russian, I suspect that they're using GPS and GLONASS. They're also probably using that in a combination of dead reckoning. So it's not like they're constantly getting a position, but they know where they are right now. And if they understand their speed and direction and all that kind of stuff, and they have enough sensors in the water, they can do some good dead reckoning. But clearly, if you have a system that is now strictly autonomous, that once it's launched, it's gone, and I have no communication with it, well, certainly that means there's no ability to recall. And if there is an ability to recall, that means there is some comms going on that we would have to figure out how we, get through any encryption that obviously they would have on that. Then, of course, the next would be they still have to be getting some navigation messages, and we would have to figure out what those are, how they're getting them, and how we might be able to redirect the weapon either by spoofing information or perhaps jamming its incoming signal. Probably that means we need to get our hands on one and understand how it works. But so those are some knee-jerk responses.
Thank you so much. My name is Roel Samson, Royal Netherlands Navy. I was triggered by the answer of the captain when you said that because it's the mining that we probably want to develop is going to be more sophisticated, able to differentiate between targets. But what I think is happening is that in the last century, we have been looking for technology to basically help ourselves avoid collateral damage and stuff like that. But by doing so, in this age, you're actually working your way towards the professor, because if you make it a smart mine, it's going to be vulnerable for all kinds of cyber attacks, manipulation, even by the way it's developed, the way it's designed. So do we need to move away from using technology as the answer to every vulnerability we have? Do we have to go back to being dumb and then be able to sail on the stars and stuff like that?
Yes and no. That's a very cop-out of an answer. But I would say, yes, it's good to get away from technology and get to sometimes go back to, yes, cell nav and being able to navigate by the stars when GPS and everything else goes away. As a surface officer, I wish I was great at celestial navigation. I am not. It is not an easy task to do by any means. I've tried it, and I was happy I was in the right hemisphere. Admittedly, that was a long time ago on board a sailboat, but the point still remains. But there also is, we can't go away from technology with the fear and the worry that it's going to be exploitable or whatever. If we develop that technology, there's some very good capability that is out there that is worthwhile to spend and invest, because and I'll look at it as the exponential increase of effects you would get from some technology is well worth it. Now it goes back to decisions made much higher than I am as far as resourcing, like how much money do we want to spend? Do we put all of our money into exquisite technologies and get 5 things, or do we put some of our money into exquisite technologies, get 1 or 2, and then spend the rest of the money on lower end stuff where we have volume and capacity as well too. There's a trade-off there, and that's made by resource sponsors and others that are making decisions on what we want to buy. Obviously, if we had as much money as we want, we all buy extra cool Gucci kit for everything, but we just don't have that money. So there's advantages of technology because the exponential effects you can get from it, but then there's also significant advantages from volume and mass as well too.
And I think we're going into our last question before the next coffee break.
I have Chris Kavanaugh, Pac Fleet. I have another mining question, or mine warfare question, and it has to do with allies and partners. So from your perspective, do we have good mechanisms and processes in place for planning and capability development among allies and partners? And I ask that for two reasons. One is, you've mentioned that the United States has not prioritized this recently in our investments, but it seems to me we don't all have to build the exact same Navy, and so there can be capabilities that allies and partners have that could be brought to bear in this area. And then second, we haven't really talked much about authorities. You alluded to it about commanders. Mine warfare, sorry for the comment, but mine warfare to me is in the same realm as space and cyber, I think, when it comes to authorities. There's going to be some hesitancy by some governments to employ mines because there's not a person in the loop necessarily. And so it'd be valuable to have multiple countries with these type of capabilities. Thanks.
Thanks for the hard question to end up on, sir. For the first question, the first part of your question, yes, we have some good coordination with allies and partners as we're moving forward. If you look at the kit that just about everybody has, we call different things Mark 18, Mod 1, Mod 2s, Remuses. They're all pretty much the same kit that is built out there. And we've got good integration with our allies and partners as we're moving forward as well too. From the French and the UK developing a joint mine countermeasures platform, the Belgian, the Dutch as well too, using some of the lessons from Littoral Combat Ship, which has had its own set of teething problems getting systems out into the fleet. For allies and partners in Indo-PACOM, we work very closely with the JMSDF, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, the Republic of Korea Navy, Australians as well too, as we're moving forward in mine countermeasures. One of the hardest problems, and I think one of the easier ones to solve, is the sharing of data amongst all of our partners. My previous comment that really mine countermeasures is a research project. We're just trying to find what's on the bottom of the ocean. Okay? Everybody can share that data. We should be able to share that data amongst ourselves. For some policies and procedures, the U.S. Navy, we're working through some of those issues, being able to share our data. And then some other countries as well too, they have the same thing. They don't necessarily want to share their data with us. There's a realization in the overall mine warfare community that this is a great first step and easy place to start sharing data to generate that interoperability amongst other countries, amongst all of us in other warfare areas as well too, not just mine countermeasures, but use it as a stepping stone into ASW, anti-submarine warfare, integrated air missile defense, and others. The second comment you've said about mining, spot on, sir. We look at mining as an effect. And what effect does the commander want to get? Do we want to impose cost? Do we want to impose delay or whatever? And getting getting way in the details of through the fires process. Hey, what is the proper way to generate this effect? Is it mining or whatever? And what authorities and ROE does the commander have to employ those weapons? Very similar to what authorities and does the commander have to employ landmines as well too, because it's not down to the company commander to put a bunch of landmines out, and that is held usually up at the very highest levels for the humanitarian HADR and the post-conflict demining that needs to be done there. Answer your question good enough, sir? Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much to our three speakers, and this concludes this panel for this morning. I understand we have a now 25-minute health break, and we will come back for our next panel.
Thank you.